Hello there, and welcome to another OneSpar weekly video. I'm OneSpar. It is good to have you here today. We are here on a very auspicious occasion. So as of today, the new set just dropped into Standard, Lorwyn Eclipsed. And one big thing about Lorwyn Eclipsed is that we have gotten a lot of extra Merfolk support. Now, I myself am a bit of a casual Merfolk enjoyer. I enjoy playing a lot of Merfolk in Standard. I know they're not currently anywhere near Tier 1, but I do enjoy running Merfolk. I also play Merfolk a lot in Timeless. I watch a lot of Merfolk content. In general, that's kind of like my pedigree here. Not obviously like the foremost judge on what is and is not good in Merfolk, but I am at least not the newest to the game. Now, a few things to note here in this lovely window that we're going to be chilling at today. We have here a tier list. You might notice, first of all, that this tier list stops at D. Usually, in tier lists like these, you would see like a row at the bottom, which would be like, you know, the F or trash or something to that nature. In this tier list, I've actually gone ahead and I have removed all of the bottom tier Merfolk, the Merfolk that I consider to be unplayable. Gosh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this. This tier list is specifically for Standard. So, you know, any Merfolk that's in Standard that I would consider not actually playable, I've gone ahead and I've just like removed them from the list. I will go through them very briefly at the beginning just to kind of give my opinion, but yeah. So we won't be talking about any trash tier Merfolk. The video will be long enough without them. Another thing I will note, we're going to be separating this video into kind of two parts. We're going to start by talking about the Merfolk that we currently have in Standard, kind of the pieces that, you know, that we've already had time to play with, that we've already had time to kind of experiment with. And then after that, we're going to go into kind of the Lorwyn Eclipsed Merfolk and kind of talk about how they either fit into, you know, the kind of stuff that we already have, or, you know, how they might, you know, iterate on the deck, possibly like take it in a new direction or something like that. Also at the end, there will be a bonus part of the video where I talk about some of the other support cards, primarily in blue. Because I think Merfolk at the end of the day is a very blue-based deck. There will be an opportunity now that the set is out for a Bant Merfolk, since we have the green Merfolk from Ixalan, and we have also the white Merfolk from now from Lorwyn. So we have the possibility of going blue, white, and green, but we'll see. As we go through this, we'll see kind of what the deal is. I have all colors of Merfolk. Oh, and there was also, surprisingly, there was one Azorius Merfolk in Final Fantasy as well. So, but anyway, yeah. So those are the colors. But as far as the support pieces are concerned, I'm primarily going to be focusing on blue because at the end of the day, Merfolk is a blue-based deck. Feel free, anybody who watches this, if you want to talk in the comments, or if you're discussing this video on Reddit or whatever, you know, consider amongst yourselves like what would be good support pieces in white and green. Anyway, those will be kind of like the three main parts of the video. I do also want to mention, since we're just kind of looking at this whole picture, you'll notice that on the Merfolk that we have currently in Standard over here, maybe you can see there's these green and red little dots. So red dots indicate Merfolk that will be rotating out next at the next rotation, and green dots are actually Merfolk that are from Foundations. Foundations are going to be in Standard apparently until like 2029, so we have them for at least another like 3 years. And then everything else is in between that. There's actually only one that's not. And by the way, just if you didn't realize, the next standard rotation will be in January 2027. So whatever deck comes out of all of this deck will be viable at least until next year. So it's another important thing to keep in mind there. All right, cool. So to get started, I know that we're doing a lot of kind of introduction here, kind of like to get on with it, but I do want to really quick run through all the trash tier merfolk, all the merfolk that I think did not fit into this list at all, and just really quick kind of like go into my thoughts on why they're not gonna work. I might not even spend that much time, but I'm just gonna like acknowledge that, you know, I didn't forget about them. So starting with the current standard from Wilds of Eldraine to Airbender, we have the Benthic Criminologist, the 5 CMC sacrifices an artifact to draw a card. In my personal opinion, Merfolk is way too fast to consider something like this. Artifacts are not really our focus, so you know, whatever. We don't care. Next, we have the Ixalan Merfolk Cave Diver, the 3 mana when it enters explores, whenever a creature explores, this creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked this turn. I mean, you know, we will be doing some exploring if we end up getting some green Merfolk, but it's nowhere near what we're trying to do. Merfolk Coralsmith from Eldraine, 3 CMC, pay 1. This creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn, and when it dies, you scry 2. I mean, you know, we have better things to do. Let's be honest. Going down, River Herald Guide as well as River Herald Scout, both from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, these are kind of draft cards. I mean, maybe 2 mana, 1/2, with the possibility of being a 2/3. I mean, but nah, come on, let's be real. Coming up next, Sahagin from Final Fantasy cares about casting non-creature spells with mana cost 4 or greater. We're not going to be casting a lot of non-creature spells. They're definitely not going to be definitely not going to be costing more than 4 mana usually. However, there is one non-creature. Well, actually, no, that one is a creature as well, so never mind. Yeah, this isn't what we're going to be doing. Seeker of Sunlight from Ixalan. Pay mana to make it explore as a sorcery. We're not going to do that. 3, no. Get out of here. Shipwrecked Dowser and Tatiova, both from Foundations. I don't think really either of these synergize well with the Merfolk deck. The Dowser is a 5 mana prowess creature that cares about instants and sorceries. Again, we're not really going to be focusing a lot on instants and sorceries in Merfolk. And then Tatiova, 5 converted mana cost, legend. Whenever a land enters, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Again, like, we're kind of too low to the ground, I think, to be considering, you know, like what we're going to be doing when we play our 6th, 7th, and 8th land. I think the game ideally will be decided before we get that deep. And then finally, the last trash tier Merfolk would be the Waterwind Scout. 3 converted mana cost. When it enters, create a map token. It is flying, which is kind of interesting because, you know, evasion is always something when we're able to kind of like pump our Merfolk. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that current standard doesn't actually have a lot of lords, which makes Merfolk a little interesting. But it definitely doesn't give the same, you know, oomph to, you know, maybe a creature with a substandard text box and you know, maybe a decent like evasion ability. Not really gonna work out. So those are the trash tier Merfolk. None of them are here on this list. They're all bad. So we're not going to talk about them. Now, let's go ahead and get into the actual tier list. So over here, we have all these very small cards. I mostly just included the picture and like the nameplate. If you can't see these, you can just listen to me talk about them, really. I mean, that's the point anyway. I might, in editing, just put up a picture of each card as I go through. And by the way, I haven't made decisions on these ahead of time. I do have written out here each card and what it does, and I have opinions in general, but I haven't actually written a script here. So we're gonna see how this goes. This might be some light editing. This might be a lot of editing. This might just be just thrown up as it is. So we'll see. So starting out with the first one on our list, we have the Brineborn Cutthroat. So this reprint that came to us from Foundations is, in my opinion, kind of a defining card. Like, whether or not you include this in your deck is kind of going to tell you what your plan is going to be. There is a decent amount of flash support in Merfolk, even in the new set. And so it's reasonable. Well, I should start by explaining exactly what the card is, in case you might not be familiar. So, Brineborn Cutthroat, 2 converted mana cost blue creature, 2 power, 1 toughness. It has flash, and whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This, like I said, it's kind of defining. So Merfolk, there's a decent amount of flash support. It's not 100%. It's not like it's like a main theme of the Merfolk, like currently to have flash, but there are a decent number that do. So it's pretty reasonable to think that we could be, holding up mana during our turn and, playing spells on our opponent's turns. That is something that is open. And if that is what you're going to be doing in a deck, I think Brineborn Cutthroat is kind of really important, because if you think about it, leaving up 2 mana, especially in blue, represents a lot of possibilities to your opponents. We're not in a deck like this going to be running a lot of counter spells, but you have to think that on turn 2, your opponent's looking at 2 open mana. They're expecting, at least if they don't know ahead of time, some kind of counterplay. And so already, your opponent is kind of on the back foot. They're nervous about playing on turn 2. And then at the end of turn, you end up playing a 2-mana creature. And, it's possible that it's just a lightning rod for removal. It's possible that, it's a 2-mana just to kind of test the waters. But even so, I mean, it's great because you immediately untap, you draw your card. If you squint, hopefully I won't, turn everyone away by these kind of like weird analogies. But if you squint really hard, if you play this card in the right situation, it's kind of, an enter the battlefield, draw a card ability. Because as soon as you cast it, you're, immediately going to draw a card afterwards, as long as you cast it on your opponent's end step. So it does, in a way, kind of replace itself. Again, if you squint really hard. So even if it gets removed, it kind of has its value already. And then, of course, if it sticks around, you're going to be holding up your mana. You attack on your turn. Again, like we said, your opponent is expecting some kind of counter, so they probably held back on their turn, and then you get to swing in. Or if not, you just hold it back. It's a blocker that gets bigger. And then, yeah, during the game, as things go on, you're playing more spells on your opponent's turn. This gets actually pretty scary quickly, and it turns into kind of like a must remove. And at 2 mana, I think that's pretty efficient. So at end of the day, where would I put Brineborn Cutthroat? Again, just because it kind of depends. It's not going to be a universal, like throw it in every single build that you do. I think I have to leave it in B. Again, just because like there are decks that I can think of where you wouldn't include this, which would be any kind of Merfolk deck that you're mostly trying to play at a sorcery speed. So it'll stay in B right there. I'm going to just update my thing right here as well. So next up, we have the Cenote Scout. Cenote Scout. No idea how to pronounce that. Sorry. I'll call it Cenote Scout. Apologies if that's incorrect. So Cenote Scout is a 1 green 1/1 creature. When it enters, it explores. No additional text. So to any non-Merfolk player, this card probably seems relatively benign. It's 1 mana. You either draw a land or it gets a +1/+1 counter. It's possibly a 1 mana 2/2. half the time it's a 1-mana 1/1. It's safer to assume that it's going to be a 1/1 in most situations. But consider a few things about this. If you're new to Merfolk, consider a few things. Chances are, if you are already a Merfolk player, Cenote Scout is considerable because of a few factors that I'm about to get into. Factor number one, Cenote Scout is 1 converted mana cost. So this is a Merfolk that assists us towards an aggro plan, because right out of the gate on turn 1, Cenote Scout comes down. It's either a 1/1 or a 2/2, and as we get more support, as we play more Merfolk, it gets better because our Merfolk naturally will synergize together. So Cenote Scout is a 1-mana creature that really helps us to move towards an aggro plan. On top of that, the possible replacement that it will allow us. Well, at the end of the day, because if you think about it, it either draws us a card or it surveils, and it gets bigger. That's what Explore is. Explore is you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes into your hand. If it's not a land, you can choose to put it in your graveyard, and you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that explored. So, if it's a land, it goes into your hand. Cenote Scout is a 1/1. If it's not a land, you can either keep it on top. Your opponent knows what it is, but at least you can select your next card, or you throw it away for something better, and your Cenote Scout becomes a 2/2. So all that being said, what are the downsides to Cenote Scout? Downside number one is that it is green, which forces us to be a little bit more flexible than maybe we would sometimes want. Like I said, Merfolk in general is a blue-based deck. A lot of our most powerful options are mono blue. With Lorwyn, it's kind of a little bit more muddled because we do have some powerful white and Azorius cards, but in general, the idea is that we want to be a blue deck, and so having a 1 green creature forces us to play dual lands, which in standard are a little bit touch and go. We do have shock lands, which are good, but they do cost 2 life. Considerable in a standard format that's rather dangerous, or conditional. Either they enter tapped or they enter untapped as long as you have a certain number of lands, or they deal damage to you in one way or another. So we do end up we end up basically adding a little bit more variance to our plan. Whereas if we didn't have a 1-mana green creature, or if we had instead a 1-mana blue creature, we would know 100% of the time, as long as I have a land, I'm definitely playing this on turn 1. Whereas with Cenote Scout, there's a chance there's okay, well, I have to, I can get it out early, but I have to give up something. Either I have to rely more on luck, or I have to, kind of pay some sort of possible opportunity cost. All that being said, in general, Cenote Scout by itself, this is a tough one. I think really the thing that most makes me nervous is the fact that it's green. We do now have all of the shock lands, so that probably kind of ameliorates that fear. Yeah, if we're being really honest, Cenote Scout, it's hard to put it any lower than B. The question is, does it go to A? 1 mana, again, if you're a Merfolk player, you already know. The 1 mana Merfolk is the elusive albatross. We're always seeking the 1 mana Merfolk that's going to save the day. Is that 1 mana Merfolk Cenote Scout? Ugh. Nah, it's a possibility. Again, it's not bad. It's really good. But is it the answer? Nah. I'm going to say that it's a solid B. It's a solid B tier card. The B tier, the individual tiers, by the way, are not going to be actually organized based on what's the best B tier versus the worst one. They're these are all generally on the same level. Next up, we have, after I update here, give me 1 second, I'm going to just dispense justice. Here we go. Next up, we have the Deepfathom Echo, again from Ixalan. Deepfathom Echo is a 4-mana Simic, so 2 green and a blue. It is a 4/4. It is not legendary. I thought for a second maybe it was, but it's not. It has the ability at the beginning of combat on your turn, this creature explores, then you may have it become a copy of another creature you control until end of turn. So Deepfathom Echo, I think, is a little bit less of a stone cold lock than either of these previous two. It's the first one that I'm really only considering either C or D, and there's a couple of reasons. First of all, at 4 mana, a Merfolk's got to do something really big. Like, again, like we are a creature based, aggro is not necessarily the right way to call it because it's a little bit different than that, but a creature based, aggressive, getting damage through, making our opponents afraid. That's what we're doing. Deepfathom Echo comes down on turn 4, and it is a 5/5. If it explores and it gets the counter, it's a 5/5. I'm being generous right now. And it possibly copies another Merfolk until the end of turn. Now, what does that do for us the turn that it comes down? The truth of the matter is, not really that much. At least not that much currently, or at least not that much before today. There's not really a lot of Merfolk, especially not non-legendary Merfolk, that give you a benefit when you have multiples. Again, we're missing like really solid lords. The closest thing we have to a lord really is the Mindspring Merfolk. Again, I'm talking about previous to Lorwyn. The closest thing we really had to a lord is the Mindspring Merfolk. That's the only thing that has the ability to really pump up the team. And then, of course, after that, there's I think there's the 3-mana artifact creature that you can choose a creature type and it pumps that creature type. I'm not really considering him because, again, like, I might consider him. At the very end, I might actually do a little extra bit where I consider that guy, but not right now. There are reasons why I don't like him. So again, closest thing we have to a lord is the Mindspring Merfolk, but you have to tap it. So the turn that Deepfathom Echo comes down, if you copy the Mindspring Merfolk, then you're still not doing anything. In fact, you're powering down your Deepfathom Echo significantly. And again, in Standard, things are so crazy. Turn 4, even turn 3, if, God forbid, we end up getting a Badgermole Cub or something, which I'm definitely not considering Badgermole Cub in a Merfolk deck currently. This is not going to do it. Like, this is really not going to make the splash that you want. Even if it doesn't die immediately, which it easily can, it has absolutely no evasion. It's still really not going to significantly impact us in the way that we need it to, especially at 4 mana. Again, like, if somehow in the future we end up, like, I don't know, like ramping, like if we can get this out on like turn, again, like Badgermole Cub, this would be a turn 3. If we can get this out on turn 3, then still, I don't know if I would really entertain it. I mean, it's a D for me right now, but not at the bottom of the bucket, but not that far away either. Very good. Next up, we have the Evidence Examiner. So Evidence Examiner is a 2 converted mana cost Simic 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may collect evidence for. Whenever you collect evidence, investigate. So again, this is another one that I'm really not considering in either of the top 2 tiers. This is kind of more in the bottom half. It's between, is this okay and is this just straight out bad? And I tend towards bad on this card. So Evidence Examiner, let's think about it. Collecting evidence basically means that we're exiling cards from our graveyard with the converted mana cost totaling 4. And when we do that, we investigate. So what are we doing? We're exiling what's essentially going to be our dead merfolk. Okay, so this comes down and it does something after some of our merfolk have already died, which on turn 2, probably not, especially not 4 mana value worth. This is going to be a later turn. This is going to be like turn 3 or 4 if we're really turboing out and our opponents are really, hitting us back. Turn 4, heated game state. And now we're going to spend 2 mana to make a 2/2, exile some cards from our graveyard, and then make an artifact to draw cards later? Ugh. That does not sound good to me. That to me sounds like this card is asking to be thrown down in a situation where you're in trouble, and then it's not really contributing much. So, I mean, to me, that's a straight D. I might have even considered putting this in the trash tier. Probably the only reason I didn't is because it's a 2 mana 2/2, so it's like it's something, but it's no. Next up, we have, oh, I love this little guy. Next up, we have the Floodpits Drowner from Duskmourn. So 2 converted mana cost mono blue creature, 1 and a blue to cast. It is a 2/1 with Vigilance and Flash. So immediately, every time we say Flash, we should remember our buddy up here, the Brineborn Cutthroat. If you're wondering, I can't see the names of these cards either, so I'm going off of memory on all this. The quality here is awful. Please bear with me. I hope you're only listening to this. Hopefully you're not actually watching this. You can see how the list shakes out at the very end. Anyway, has Flash. Remember Brineborn, okay? So this is immediately a card that is going to synergize with Brineborn. They're going to go in a deck together simply because this one has Flash and this one has Flash. Like I said, this one is powerful in a deck where you're playing cards on your opponent's turn. This one is played on your opponent's turn. Bada bing, bada boom. These guys are homies. So now the question is, what does Floodpits Drowner do as its own man? So as its own merman. So as I said, 2 mana, Flash, 2/1. Also has Vigilance. Not bad. However, Vigilance is kind of a tricky keyword with another support card that I'm going to talk about later. But still, not bad in combat. It has its ability. When it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. You can pay 1 and a blue and tap it, so not the turn it comes out, but on a later turn. You can shuffle this creature and target creature with a stun counter on it into their owner's libraries. So this, what it is a 2 mana Merfolk that's also a 4 mana removal spell. And that's actually going to be a category of Merfolk. We have a few of those. We're going to talk about at least 2. But this is a 2 mana Merfolk that's also a 4 mana removal spell. What's the play pattern with the Floodpits Drowner? So you have your turn 2, or any future turn. Your opponent is playing. They have their scary creature, whether it's going to be scary in combat, whether it's going to be scary because of its battlefield ability. It's either its continuous effect, its activated ability, whatever it is. Your opponent's turn, they go to combat, and in response, you play the Floodpits Drowner. 2 mana. So again, you're holding up the 2 blue mana. They're already thinking, okay, here comes the counterspell. Floodpits Drowner comes down. So immediately what happens is you are going to tap and put a stun counter on, whatever the scary thing was, which may or may not be what's attacking. Then combat's going to happen. Now your opponent has to reconsider their combat because, you have an extra 2/1 to deal with. And then, whatever happens. Hopefully you're able to leave the Floodpits Drowner up because it does give you value when you untap. But in the worst case scenario, you can also trade with it in combat. And then your opponent ends their turn, and you go to your upkeep. So now your opponent's scary threat is tapped with a stun counter. Your Floodpits Drowner is there with Vigilance. So you're going to go to combat yourself, and you're going to attack with the Floodpits Drowner regardless of whether or not your opponent has blockers. Attack with whatever you want. Now, once blockers are declared, you have a choice to make. If the Floodpits Drowner is blocked, you can immediately use its ability to just send it out of there, as well as your opponent's threat. Maybe they draw it later, but, it's gone for now. And then if it's not blocked, obviously, you let it deal damage first, and then you can decide at that moment to either remove your opponent's threat, again in the same way, or just leave your 2/1. Leave your 2/1 with Vigilance and just keep pounding away. Your opponent, when they untap, they still don't get to use that same creature for combat because, again, it had a stud counter, so you have to wait an additional turn. And then, you're getting advantage there. You're getting board state. You're getting, damage to the face. That's what we want to do. Really not the kind of card you want to play on your turn, even if it didn't have flash. The card that you tap, you will never be able to remove because Floodpits Drowner will have Summoning Sickness during your turn, and then when your opponent untaps, they will remove the stun counter, and it's no longer a legal target for the removal part. So you really got to play it as flash speed. But again, this is a 4-mana removal spell. That's also potentially a creature that you're going to go to the face with. What does that mean for the Floodpits Drowner? How does that fit into the rest of the Merfolk deck? I think Floodpits Drowner is actually kind of an all-star. It's hard for me to even say that this is potentially a B tier card. I really, really like Floodpits Drowner. Again, like the fact that this gives you the ability to be so aggressive, it gives you the ability to leave up mana on your opponent's turn. It gives you the ability to remove something that, is really, busting you up, really gumming up the board or whatever it is. It really does everything, in my opinion, that you want a Merfolk to do in a Merfolk deck. And so considering that I have those thoughts on it, I can't not have it be an A tier card. This is definitely going to be my first A. Floodpits Drowner, A tier. Moving right along. Next up, we have the Forensic Researcher. So 3 converted mana cost, 2 and a blue. It is a 1/3 creature with 2 activated abilities. First activated ability is free. You just tap it, and you untap another target permanent you control. Okay? Second ability, you have to collect evidence 3. Tap target creature you don't control. So that's a little bit more of like a control ability. And that's it. So what's the deal with the Forensic Researcher? I mean, this looks very similar to a card that I just said is in the D tier, and also pretty similar to a card that I also recently said is trash. So why is Forensic Researcher not immediately there? And there's a couple of reasons. And actually, there's only one reason. There's one reason this card is even considerable, and it's only thanks to a little friend of ours that we're going to see later called Deeproot Pilgrimage. So if you have 2 forensic researchers, and you have a Deeproot Pilgrimage, you and both forensic researchers are not summoning sick. You have an infinite combo where you can tap one forensic researcher, untap, excuse me, tap one forensic researcher, untap the other target forensic researcher, then tap that forensic researcher to untap the first forensic researcher. Deeproot Pilgrimage is an enchantment that says whenever a non-token merfolk you control becomes tapped, you create a 1/1 blue merfolk with hexproof. So essentially, forensic researcher times 2 plus Deeproot Pilgrimage equals infinite hexproof merfolk tokens. Maybe, depending on how familiar you are with Standard, how new you are to Magic in general, maybe that sounds awesome. Maybe that sounds like the best thing that you can possibly do. Infinity Merfolk. What can be better than Infinity Merfolk? Well, it turns out a lot of things can be better than Infinity Merfolk, because this combo kind of sucks. I mean, in the best case scenario, if your opponent doesn't have anything they can do, then yeah, you can basically untap and you can kill them 100% of the time. Again, if they don't have any response. You can get over any number of blockers, you can, get over any number of health as long as you don't time out in arena. And it's a win. But Forensic Researcher, unfortunately, is 3 mana. It does not have any evasion itself, and even more so, you have to have 2 of them. And even considering that blue mana is the color for clones, it's just not worth it, because at the end of the day, you're playing against an opponent, and your opponent is going to have an answer to what you're doing. Maybe they won't, and honestly, if your opponent doesn't have an answer to what you're doing, then, most decks will win, hopefully. But that's just the fact of the matter, is that this card asks a lot. Even when the situation is perfect, it asks for a lot to do even anything. And if you, for example, get any other part of your combo removed, either the enchantment or the second forensic researcher, suddenly this becomes incredibly depressing. Spending turn 3 or turn 4 or even turn 5, 3 mana on a 1/3 that lets you untap something else, it does not feel good. Not in Standard, not at any moment. What does that mean? Ugh. Is it any better than these other 2? The fact that it has the possibility to combo, does that make it a C tier card? I don't know, because that's the other thing, is that this Merfolk with Deeproot Pilgrimage makes a Merfolk deck. But if you make that Merfolk deck a combo deck by, for instance, like having a lot of clones, having a lot of protection, having ways to search up your combo pieces, maybe, giving your stuff haste, maybe this turns into like some kind of actual deck, like the Airbend deck. The current Bant Airbend deck is, pretty decent. I mean, but the thing about that is that it enters at flash speed, and all of its pieces are also removal spells or also protection spells. So that being said, there's no shot. This has got to be a D tier card. Again, even in its best case scenario, you're not gonna have a good time. Doubt it. All right, cool. Moving down to the second row here. So we have the Furtive Courier. This is a 3 mana blue, 2 and a blue rather, 3/2 creature. It can't be blocked as long as you've sacrificed an artifact this turn. Whenever it attacks, draw a card and discard a card. again, I think this card asks to be in a deck that Merfolk isn't really trying to be. We've talked about Merfolk already that create artifacts. We've talked about Merfolk that kind of care about artifacts, but those Merfolk are already not the best. And the Furtive Courier, while it has an aggressive stat line, this creature on turn 4, when it untaps and is able to attack, is not impressive. Your opponent is either going to have, infinite ally tokens, or they're going to have a whole board of red creatures, or they're going to, already have their combo assembled. And at that point, a 3/2 is just not that interesting. Again, especially when all it does is draw and discard. So it's even with its evasion, I'm not impressed. I don't really see this doing anything. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw this one into the D tier. Not impressed. Sorry, buddy. Next up, we have the Harbinger of the Tides. Harbinger of the Tides. Remember I said earlier we have a little sub-theme in Merfolk of 2-mana creatures that are also 4-mana removal spells. So Harbinger of the Tides is a 2-mana blue-blue 2/2 creature. When it enters, you may return target tapped creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. Now, as well, if you spend 2 generic mana more to cast it, it gains flash. So in other words, you can play it on an opponent's turn if you pay 4 instead of 2. Now, Harbinger of the Tides, in my opinion, is basically like a secondary, not quite as good Floodpits Drowner, but it's not quite cut and dry. It's kind of a side grade. So Harbinger of the Tides, number 1, cannot target an untapped creature. So already its options are very limited. This is only going to be targeting basically creatures that are in combat. Because otherwise, it won't be able to target. A couple of interesting things to note. This does kind of do something interesting against Kona specifically. Kona is a 4-mana green beast that at the beginning of your second main phase, if it's tapped, you can put a permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. So Kona is kind of like a combo piece with Omniscience, since Omniscience is currently in Standard. And Harbinger of the Tides for 4 mana actually negates basically that whole Kona play, because your opponent taps their Kona by whatever means, and then in response to them going to their next step, you play the Harbinger of the Tides for 4. It bounces Kona, nothing happens. They basically kind of wasted their turn, or they have to play Kona again. So an interesting thing there that immediately takes care of Kona, whereas Floodpits Drowner is not something that you can really use to deal with Kona at all, or at least not effectively. Not efficiently. Where it also kind of fails is that the creature that you target is going to get returned to hand. It's not going to get shuffled into the library, so it's possible that the opponent just plays it again on their second main phase, or on their next turn, and it's a little bit of a softer removal in that way. Now that being said, 2-mana 2/2, reasonably costed, reasonably statted Merfolk, with the possibility of also being a removal. This is a bounce spell. It doesn't do nothing. It does not do nothing. But it's also really hard to say that this is anywhere near as good as Floodpits Drowner. Again, even considering that Kona situation, I think that's still relatively narrow in Standard. I don't really believe in that. And then you know, on top of that, the removal just being so much softer, just being like not at all as permanent. Neither one is permanent, obviously, but you know, even less so this than the other. So I don't think this fits into A at all. B tier, I think it's still actually kind of questionable, because now if we're considering Harbinger of the Tides more as, you know, like a creature, as something that can be, you know, kind of aggressive, it doesn't grow. It is not flash speed unless you play it for 4, which, you know, at that point it's no longer as aggressive because you're playing it on turn, you know, 4 probably rather than turn 2. And so it doesn't really feel good on in B as well. It kind of feels like a C again, just because it's sort of like your secondary backup Floodpits Drowner. It's sort of like your backup, you know, 2-mana Merfolk that's probably better than this. It's sort of your backup removal spell. You know, it's something to include if you need it, if you're kind of missing that stuff. Hold on, I'm trying to kind of center this a little bit more. Yeah, it's there if you need it. Moving along. Jadelight Spelunker. So this is a X cost card. So it's X and 1 green for a 1/1. When it enters, it explores X times. So first of all, what are the benefits of the Jadelight Spelunker? The benefits are that it is going to be on curve, and no matter which turn you play it. On turn 1, it's a 1-mana 1/1. Not bad. You know, we said Cenote Scout, you know, in some cases it's just going to be a 1/1, so that's, you know, we're not raving about that, but, you know, it's a 1/1 that has some added value to it. Not in that particular situation, but, you know, in other situations it has added value. And then later on in the game, this becomes, you know, X plus 1 value, X plus 1 mana value, XX potentially, or XX minus Y, where Y is a number of lands that you're going to be putting into your hand instead. And of course, you're going to be, you know, surveilling through your deck while you put counters on it. What does that do for us as a Merfolk deck? I mean, again, we're trying to be aggressive. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the plus side. What's the negative? Negative number 1, this is a vanilla creature, so there's no evasion on this thing. Negative number 2, this is a green creature, so similar to Cenote Scout, it has the drawback of requiring a decent kind of amount of green sources in order to play effective, you know, consistently on turn 1, when it's, you know, technically the first possible turn you can play it. Honestly, it's not really done it for me. There have been times where I have included Jadelight Spelunker in Merfolk decks where I kind of lean more on the control side. In decks like that, where you're planning to possibly get up to, you know, like 6, 7, 8 mana, this could be actually pretty good. You know, you play it for like 4, you leave 3 up, you know, for your counter spell on the next turn, and then you get like a decent amount of card selection, or possibly land draw. I can see arguments for this card. However, again, I really don't believe in it generally. It's between C and D for me. If I'm gonna put it in one or the other, I think this is slightly more realistic than any of the cards in the D tier. It might even be like a little tiny, and now I'm not willing to say it's better or worse than Harbinger of the Tides, so that probably puts the nail in the coffin there, C tier. Next up, we do have Kiora, the Rising Tide. So this is a 3-mana blue Merfolk legend, and this card is a 3 power, 2 toughness. When it enters, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Whenever it attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. Oh boy. So, Kiora. I'm torn. I think this card, under the right circumstances, can be very appealing. I don't think this is ever the best thing in the world for you, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a 3-mana Merfolk, which in the Merfolk world is a pretty high mana value. That first of all does not have any sort of removal or controlling effects, and second of all does not have any sort of flash or evasion. It does, on the other hand, draw 2 cards. You do then have to discard the same number of cards. So if you're empty-handed, this you're just gonna basically mill yourself for 2. But if you have more cards than that in hand, then it's fine selection. And then it does have the added benefit later in the game. Again, Merfolk decks, we're not really going to be throwing a lot of cards into the graveyard unless those are Merfolk that have been removed. Or, it could be the 2 cards that Kiora discards could, help you get there as well. But that's only going to be 2 out of the 7. Later on in the game, you attack with Kiora, you get the 8/8 octopus. That's basically, target number 1 for kill spells. Now... basically, your opponent will not be allowed to let the 8/8 blue octopus live. That has to die. Or, if they have chump blockers, then it's basically neutralized. But that's the other issue with it not having the evasion. And again, neither Kiora nor the token have evasion, so that's kind of rough. Also, Scion of the Deep is a legendary token, so you can't even, multiply those at all in any way, outside of certain circumstances. So what does all this mean at the end of the day? Kiora has its benefits. It has significant drawbacks, however. Not an A-tier Merfolk, in my opinion. I could see that potentially being a bit of a controversial take. However, hopefully not a very controversial take. Now, what will be controversial is if I end up dropping it from B to C. Is this a B tier card? I mean, it's a lot of, it's got a lot in under the hood. It does a lot for you. As well, blue and now white are colors that are prone to blinking effects. Returning Kiora to your hand and then playing her again to get more card selection is something. It's at least something that you can consider. Or maybe you don't, because you end up going down a lot of cards that way. But there's something there. I kind of keep talking myself out of B tier. I really think that at the end of the day, this is kind of just like a backup in certain situations where it's relevant and not necessarily something that you really want to fill your deck with. Yeah. Fight me in the comments, but I think Kiora is going to be C tier. That's my final take. Next up, we have the Mindspring Merfolk. Mind what? Never mind. Mindspring Merfolk is a 1 blue mana, 1/1 creature. It has an exhaust ability. Exhaust is from Aether Drift. It basically is just an ability that you can only activate once, or at least until you blink the creature, remove it from the battlefield. As long as the creature is on the battlefield, the exhaust ability can happen only 1 time, and then it's done. The exhaust ability costs X and 2 blue mana, and you have to tap the Mindspring Merfolk. You draw X cards, and you put a 1/1 counter on each Merfolk creature you control. So I said before that there's exactly 1 Lord currently in Standard for Merfolk, and this is it. So if you're a Merfolk player from any format other than Standard, you're probably like in physical pain right now hearing me say this. But as far as things that directly pump our Merfolk, this is it. This is what we got. All right, it comes down on turn 1 and it does absolutely nothing. It has no evasion. On turn 2, you can take your entire turn to tap it and put a 1/1 counter on it. If you wait around, if you let it, sit until later parts of the game, later turns, it might draw you a few cards, and it might put a 1/1 counter on all the Merfolk on the battlefield in that moment. Now, what points does Mindspring Merfolk have against it? Oh, you might be asking, those weren't the points against it? No, those are that's the positives of Mindspring Merfolk. What does it have going against it? So Mindspring Merfolk is very weak to any kind of board wipe, any kind of thing that clears the board at any time really cancels out our Mindspring Merfolk. So the Lord, big air quotes ability, is 1/1 counters. They go on at one moment and then they're done. If your opponent plays a board wipe after that or during that process, you played yourself. Everything is gone and you got nothing out of that, which I mean is reasonable because like a Lord is the same thing. You get a board wipe and then you're blown out. But Mindspring Merfolk hurts more because you also had to pay mana for it. It sucks. That being said, 1 mana for a Lord, it's kind of nice, right? I mean, it's kind of like forget about all that stuff I just said. 1 mana Merfolk Lord, huh? Right? Huh? Well, it's a toss-up, really. I mean, I'll be honest. As of the previous Standard, previous to Lorwyn, I considered Mindspring Merfolk to be a necessary add for every single Merfolk deck. The reason being, there is exactly one other 1 mana blue Merfolk in Standard, again previous to Lorwyn, and it sucks. It's on this list, so it's not the worst, but it's not that good. So Mindspring Merfolk, despite all its drawbacks, despite being an incredibly tame card in the grand scheme of Merfolk, I feel like is kind of the strongest glue we have for the list. Again, coming up to Lorwyn. What does that mean right now? Well, there are a few more things that support our Merfolk now. Was there? Oh my god, this is so embarrassing. I'm actually gonna have to look right now. Is there actually like a just straight Merfolk Lord? I'm looking at my notes right here. Is there actually something that just gives Merfolk 1/1 right now? No. The closest thing we have is something that gives a attacking Merfolk +1/+0 until end of turn. So no, there is not currently a Merfolk Lord per se in Standard. Doesn't exist. Okay, hey there, back. Or I guess still here. That's how videos work. So I have given the video a watch. I have reviewed some of the cards, and I realized that I made a significant error when I first recorded this video. For one particular card, which is the the Deep Channel Duelist. So Deep Channel Duelist, I mentioned, it is the 2 mana Azorius Merfolk that says at the beginning of your end step, untap target Merfolk you control. In the way that I formatted the list of things that I'm reading from here, I actually did not have it directly in front of my face that this is actually also a Lord effect. In the video, I made quite a bit of a point to mention that the only Lord we really have is the Mindspring Merfolk, but the truth is, the matter is actually that there is a second one now. We have the Deep Channel Duelist. So, upon further review, the final version of the tier list is going to look slightly different than the one that I show as we're going through, because the fact that Deep Channel Duelist gives your other Merfolk +1/+1 is actually huge. The fact that you get to combine that alongside of the slightly beneficial effect makes it actually quite essential, because again, our deck is very much dependent on effects that boost our team, and this is the one that does that most directly. So with that in mind, please know that the final ranking for the Deep Channel Duelist is actually going to be at A, and just as one final extra note, the fact that we do have a Lord effect does also mean that our other one-mana Merfolk, our one-mana Merfolk are also going to be even more powerful. So Mindspring Merfolk is not going to decrease in rank, because despite everything, it is still quite a powerhouse at 1 mana. Now it gets pumped by the Deep Channel Duelist as well. It pumps the team with Deep Channel Duelist, and Cenote Scout and Mistway Spy now get even better because they enter not as 1/1s, but as potentially 2/2s, or by the time they attack, they might become 2/2s, or even in Cenote Scout's instance, 3/3s. Now, Deep Channel Duelist as well does put us even further, now that it is going to be in the A tier. That does put us even further into Azorius in general as Merfolk. However, there is still some hope for a Bant deck list. Definitely don't see Simic coming out of this at all, but at the very least, there could be potentially a Bant list out of that. So that's it. That's just the aside. Maybe there will be an additional one. Hopefully not. Enjoy the video. Sweet. Oh, did I just lie? Oh, no, okay. I looked at part of the list was cut off. I did not lie. No other lords. This is it. I hate to say this, and actually it hurts me to say this. I mean, this is... how can you say this isn't a must include? Like, honestly, I think in any other standard, in any other situation, if we had any other option, this card would be dog water. But this is the only Lord that we have, and it's 1 mana. I mean, I think it's got to be an A. I don't think I can walk away with my head held high giving it a grade lower than A, even though if we had a single other Lord, it would probably be a D. If we had one other, like, straight up just Merfolk Lord, if we had one, even if we just had, even if we had like Merrow Reejerey, even if we just had like even just a 3-mana Merfolk Lord, just a 3-mana like vanilla, like French vanilla Merfolk you control, get +1/+1. I think that would probably put Mindspring Merfolk way down in this list. But the fact that it kind of is the only thing that does what it does, and it also does it at a... I can't say that it's an efficient rate. It does what it does, and it's the only thing. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all of the extended Merfolk family, but Mindspring Merfolk is currently kind of the head of the table. Ugh. Mistway Spy. 1 blue mana. This is another 1/1. This is the other creature I was talking about. And while I did kind of trash on it earlier, it actually does kind of have a little bit of benefit. I've kind of warmed up to it slightly. So 1 mana 1/1. This card, first of all, has flying. So this is, I believe, well, until until Lorwyn came out, this is one of just 2 flying merfolk. So that's pretty significant. That's pretty good evasion as far as merfolk is concerned, is to have flying. This gets in pretty consistently. It also has a disguise ability. So disguise is an ability that you use from your hand. You pay 3 generic mana to put the card face down. While it's face down, it's a 2/2 that has ward 2. So, not the first thing that your opponent wants to target with a removal spell, because, they're going to have to pay a tax, but they might because, maybe they don't know what it is. However, I will say this is the only merfolk on this list that has disguise, so if your opponent is at all familiar, they're going to immediately know. What happens? So the next thing that happens, you can pay 2 mana at any time and turn the face down creature face up. So now it's going to be the 1/1 with flying. When this creature is turned face up, this is the ability. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate. Investigate creates a clue token. Clue tokens you can pay 2, sacrifice, and draw a card. I will be honest. I think the most relevant piece of text on this entire card is flying, and I think the second most relevant piece of text is 1/1. I think the disguise ability is incredibly niche. Even when I have the mana available and I draw this card late in the game, it physically hurts me to pay 3 to put this face down, and then pay 2 later, put it face up, pay 2 again at another time to draw a card. That is awful. That alone, if this was like a 3 mana creature that had these same abilities, it's in the garbage. It's already trash tier. But forget all that, because the most important part about this card is that it's a 1 blue mana flying 1/1 merfolk. What does that mean? That means that it is immediately playable. Isn't that funny? So this is immediately, I think, in at least the B tier. Again, just because this is a 1 mana card, this supports our aggro plan, and it has evasion. So it's getting in. In a majority of cases, if it doesn't get removed, it will deal combat damage. So I think for those reasons, despite being relatively uninteresting, I think for those reasons it has to be in the B tier, because this is one of your few options at 1 mana with evasion. Onwards. We have Nicanzil, the current Conductor, which is a 2 mana Simic creature. 2/3. Whenever a creature you control explores a land card, so in other words, you explore, I explained before, you explore and you'll either find a land card or you'll find a card that's not a land. If it's a land, it goes into your hand. So whenever a creature you control explores a land card, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Now, the other option, you find a non-land card. Again, when you find a non-land card, you reveal it, and you choose whether to put it on the top of your library or into your graveyard. You put a 1/1 counter on the creature that explores. So whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, you put a 1/1 counter on Nicanzil. So basically, just putting that into plain English, Nicanzil is on the battlefield. You explore. If you put a land into your hand, you can just put that land onto the battlefield tapped. If you find a non-land card, then Nicanzil is also going to get the 1/1 counter. So basically, you're going to get like two explorers for 1, but just the counters, obviously. This is a legendary creature. It is a 2 mana 2/3 in Simic. So pluses and minuses. Plus is that if you are going to play the Simic Merfolk plan, the Simic Merfolk plan does have a decent amount of Explore. It does have a decent amount of things like map tokens and things like that. In a deck like that, if you're planning to be using those Explore tokens, Nicanzil can be pretty interesting. This is, like, again, Mindspring Merfolk is the closest we have to a Lord. Nicanzil is like Mindspring Merfolk's like third cousin twice removed. Like he's somewhat kind of Lord-like in that if your creature was going to get bigger anyway, he also gets bigger. So, it's something. It's something. It's some kind of benefit with multiple Merfolk. Now, that's the benefit. What's the drawback? Are you going to be playing Simic? Maybe. Are you going to be playing Bant? Maybe. If not, then he's gone. Are you going to be able to keep him on the battlefield while keeping other creatures on the battlefield while also exploring with those creatures? Maybe. Will you be able to do that reliably? Maybe not. It's kind of tough. So 2 mana, relatively aggressive stat line, a 2/3, he's not the worst blocker on, your opponent's turn 3, assuming that you're on the draw. But he's also not the best blocker. And then, maybe he gets better as more Merfolk come out, especially more green Merfolk. I don't think it's a D. I don't think he's on the D tier. I definitely don't think he's on the A tier because, again, it's just too narrow. Like, you really have to commit to your explore plan, and then you really, really have to, get your Merfolk out, and you really got to protect them. Maybe Simic is a color pair that does have protection. Maybe, but it's a maybe. Since it's a lot of maybes, I kind of have to throw him into the C tier. I just don't think that he's enough of a stone cold lock to really be B tier. However, if a Bant deck emerges with these Lorwyn cards that we're about to talk about, he might end up actually getting kind of like moved upwards. So we'll see about that. Next up, the Prime Speaker, Zegana. So this is a 6 converted mana cost Simic card. 2 mana, 2 generic mana, double green and double blue for a 1/1, but not really. Prime Speaker Zegana enters with X/1/1 counters on it, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. When she enters, you draw cards equal to... when it enters, you draw cards equal to its power. Want to be respectful there. So I'll come right out of the gate. This is also a legendary card, if I didn't mention. I'll come right out of the gate. 2 big drawbacks for this card. And they both kind of relate to the same central theme. Prime Speaker Zegana is a Merfolk that doesn't really want to be in a Merfolk deck. First of all, 6 mana. Again, Merfolk, aggressive, dealing damage to the face. We want to be high density of creatures in our deck, not really a high density of lands. It's going to be hard to... It's really going to be hard to, make sure that we see that 6th mana if we're trying to be aggressive. The other thing, Prime Speaker Zegana wants you to have creatures with high power. We have 1 Lord. So any creatures that we bring to a high power are going to be creatures that we've pumped up slowly over time, and in a format like Standard, you really don't often get that opportunity. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about this card. It's hard to say that it can be anything other than D in a Merfolk deck. In a deck that's not Merfolk, I think you can consider Prime Speaker Zegana if you're going to be playing big creatures, if you're going to be playing a lot of lands, if you're going to be playing, stuff like that. Maybe in like a Simic big stuff control, whatever, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's a D tier card right there. That's D for us. Next up, and we're getting to the end of our previous standard. Next up we have, I'm going to keep this up here, Sentinel of the Nameless City. 3 mana green, so 2 and a green. This is a 3/4. When it enters or attacks, create a map token. A map token is just an artifact token that says pay 1 and sacrifice to have a creature explore. So this is kind of like, this is kind of like explore, but with some extra steps. And the added benefit that we can explore onto other creatures. Now, Sentinel of the Nameless City has been central in Simic Merfolk decks recently, or really just kind of Simic decks in general, because of a few reasons. First of all, at 3 mana, in a mid-range deck, which we're kind of just like one step away from, is a very reasonable cost. 3/4 is a very reasonable stat line. If I did not mention before, this creature has Vigilance, so it is both offense and defense. And it grows because the map tokens that you make when it enters or attacks, you can use those map tokens on it. It can grow slowly as long as you find non-lands on the top. So does that translate then to the Merfolk plan? And the answer is sometimes, and kind of. So 3 mana, like I kind of mentioned with Kiora, is sort of the higher end of what we really want to be paying for our Merfolk. Anything more than 3 mana, it has to be something like really impressive that we, like can't live without, because again, we want to be aggressive. We want to have low mana value creatures so that we can play them early, play a high density of them, and end the game relatively quickly. Sentinel of the Nameless City, in that case, has to be basically our late game, kind of like our finisher. And as a finisher, it's not the worst. It comes down and it doesn't have any evasion. It could just be killed immediately. But if it gets killed immediately, then you do have a map token left over, which you can use to pump a different creature. Again, this is another very, 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 very almost kind of sort of Lord, because it slowly pumps our team up over time. That's kind of like what the Merfolk quote unquote Lords are doing currently. So it's not really that useful for that, but it does do that. And in situations where you can kind of protect your team, or where you can kind of like spread out the benefits, there's something. It's a non-bow. I should mention this is the first card that's a complete non-bow with Deeproot Pilgrimage, a card that I'm going to talk about later. But it's something. What does that something add up to? I don't think this is a D tier card. I think this is too respectable to be down here. It does fit into Merfolk decks, unlike these guys down here. It fits into competitive. It fits into kind of an aggressive Merfolk strategy. Is it not an A tier card? I don't think so. And the reason is because this is just too weak to any sort of removal, anything that kind of everyone has these days. Every color has removal, every deck has removal, every deck has an ability to get rid of a 3 mana creature. By that time, you're expecting something to come down that's going to try to end the game. Does Sentinel of the Nameless City then live up to that reputation of a must-kill threat? If you let it, it can run away. But that's the question. Will your opponent let it? If the answer is ever going to be no, then it can't be A, I think. Will your opponent let it sometimes? And I think that answer tells us whether or not it's going to be in B or C. I think they're... No, I really just think in most situations this is going to be killed too quickly to really make a significant benefit. However, it could do something in certain situations. One moment. Okay, so moving on to the next and nearly last card in our list, we have Sharae of Numbing Depths, which is the only card on our list from Wilds of Eldraine, not on the Trash Tier. This is a 4-mana Azorius Merfolk. So the only Azorius Merfolk that's not actually from Lorwyn, which is another interesting fact. So 4 mana, 2 white and a blue, for a 2/3. When it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. Whenever you tap one or more untapped creatures your opponents control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, I mean, okay. I'm going to come out and say it. This is not a good Merfolk. I mean, like we said already, 4 mana is something that we're really not willing to pay unless it's going to be something that really changes the course of the game. And this is not that. It is true that it replaces itself. It comes down, taps a creature, and draws a card. That creature does get a stun counter on it. There's a light synergy there between Sharae and Floodpits Drowner, which is our A tier card right there. So, you know, if we have Sharae and we have Floodpits Drowner, there's a reasonable amount of times that we're going to actually end up drawing more than one card there. But the question is, when are we going to be drawing that card? On turn 5? I don't know. Again, like at that point of the game, people are already basically winning, and you know we don't really want to be doing that unless we're like maybe trying to play a control game. And again, in a control game like 4 mana, we just really want to be doing more. I'm really trying to think of a reason not to put this in D, but come on, let's be real. And rounding out the list with a card that honestly, it's wild to me that this is actually still in Standard, because this is probably the only card that anybody who's not playing Standard has actually heard of. Tishana's Tidebinder. So if you're not familiar with this one, this is a 3 mana blue, so it's a 2 and a blue for a 3/2. When this creature enters, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as this creature remains on the battlefield. Now, this is definitely a powerful effect in Eternal formats because of just how powerful those triggers are. So in Eternal formats, these triggers are like fetch lands. These triggers are like Ragavan. These creatures are like Bowmasters. All these things that are going to basically win the game. And then if you're able to play Tishana's Tidebinder in response to those, not only do you counter those triggered abilities, but also those creatures lose all abilities, and so you're essentially kind of locking them out of the game until Tishana's Tidebinder can be removed. And in Eternal formats, this is the kind of thing that if you can get that kind of advantage on your opponent, that's sometimes all you need. Again, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of, counter magic and other things in Eternal formats. I'm less familiar with those formats. This is not a video about those formats. What about Standard? So in Standard, this still does do a lot of good things. We still do have activated and triggered abilities of lands that sacrifice themselves to find other lands. So if you have, for instance, Fabled Passage, you can answer Fabled Passage with Tishana's Tidebinder. That you basically just removed a land with Tishana's Tidebinder, which is a really amazing feeling when you're on the right side of it. There are plenty of powerful creatures in Standard. A lot of really powered triggered and activated abilities of creatures. Artifacts, there are plenty of powerful artifacts, plenty of powerful activated and triggered abilities of artifacts. Planeswalkers, not really, but needless to say, there is not a lack of things to answer with Tishana's Tidebinder, and for that reason, I do think it is pretty powerful in Standard. However, There are certain things that Tishana's Tidebinder kind of runs into, more so in Standard than I think in other formats, where it's a little bit easier probably to protect with like free counter spells and you know, other sorts of things. Tishana's Tidebinder is a creature, and currently in Standard there's a lot of answers for creatures. There's a lot of instant speed answers for creatures. Tishana's Tidebinder has two toughness, so it dies to red removal, it dies to all the black removal. Any green fight spell will kill this, all the white removal kills this. It's relatively weak in that sense, and if you play it on turn 3, which is, you know, when you generally want to be playing things in Standard is like on curve, you know, you're leaving it open to be answered pretty quickly. And then if your opponent can, you know, cast another thing that'll take the place of the thing that you interrupted, or if that thing that you interrupted is now perfectly fine because, you know, the Tidebinder is no longer there, then it's whatever. It's kind of you're kind of setting yourself back. So it is less viable in Standard than the Eternal formats. But how much less? I still think Tishana's Tidebinder is quite good, and I actually will say that I think it is even like a must include. I think this, a couple of things to mention here. First of all, Flash. Flash, remember we said back here, the Cutthroat, all the way at the beginning. Flash and Cutthroat, or Tidebinder and Cutthroat work together. Drowner and Cutthroat work together. These two up here work together. This, remember we said 4 mana, 2 mana creatures that are also 4 mana removals. This is a 3 mana creature that is a free removal sometimes, depending on what it is, or counterspell. You know, it's interaction. It is on the expensive side, and it doesn't do anything continuously while it's on the battlefield, which makes it a little bit, tiny bit more controversial, I think. Again, from the outlook of Standard, I definitely think there will be some Standard Merfolk players who won't play this card, but in my opinion, it's a must include. And yeah, that basically concludes all of the previously legal Standard Merfolk. So now what we have left are going to be the new Merfolk from the new set. And I will start, because I didn't mention them before, I will start with the 3 that I thought were particularly not that good. They're not going to be on this list. We're not actually going to talk about them in length. First up, Gravegill Scoundrel. 2 mana blue Merfolk, 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Whenever this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped creature you control. If you do, this creature can't be blocked this turn. It has Vigilance. Weak Merfolk. We do not have Lords in this format, so we don't really have a consistent way to make it bigger. It is not that great. It's a pass. Merrow Sky Swimmer. 5 mana, 3 and 2 Azorius hybrid. For a 2/2, when it enters, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token. It does have Convoke, and it has Vigilance and Flying. I do not like this card. I think we will be way too far ahead in the game when this comes out, either when we have the mana or either when we have enough creatures. It will create 2 bodies, a 2/2 and a 1/1. The 2/2 is going to have Vigilance and Flying. It is something to consider, but I do not think that it will have enough of an effect to actually be something. I think the 2/2, again, that late in the game will easily be answered, and the 1/1 will not have enough of an effect on its own. If this was, like, in comparison, this is a card that is very similar in stature and ability to Badgermole Cub. Badgermole Cub is a 2/2, which brings a 1/1 with it. Badgermole Cub makes this look like straight up garbage. It's a pass. Next up is the Shore Lurker. 4 mana white Merfolk, 3 and a white for a 3/3. When it enters, Surveil 1. Way too expensive. Surveil 1 is not something that we're gonna waste our time on. Tributary Vaulter, 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 1/3. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, another target merfolk you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn and flying. This starts having an effect on turn 4. It is a 1/3 with evasion. We do not have our lords in this format. It does nothing. Wanderbrine Preacher. It is a 2 mana, 1 and a white, a 2/2. When it becomes tapped, you gain 2 life. Otherwise, no evasion. I mean, like, you know, what are we going to do? Are we going to attack on turn 3 with a 2/2 to gain 2 life? It's going to die. It's dead. Waterbrine Trapper. 1 mana, white merfolk to a 2/1. This is probably the one that I thought the most about, but at the end of the day, I do not like it. The ability is pay 1 mana and tap it, tap another untapped creature you control, and then you can tap a creature an opponent controls. What this probably does the best, this triggers what can I say? For 1 mana and tapping 2 other creatures you control, this triggers Deeproot Pilgrimage twice. And I think that's actually the first time that thought occurred to me. And I think that considering that, it's almost actually D tier. I think this ability, like, because here's the thing. The ability itself, what it does, tapping a creature an opponent controls, I think for what it is, awful. I don't like it. But if you rewrite this ability as pay 1 mana, tap this creature, tap another untapped creature you control, trigger Deeproot Pilgrimage twice, is that worth it? Because the other thing is that at the end of the day, it is a 1 mana creature, and it's relatively aggressive at 1 mana for 2 power. I mean, I'm not going to put it onto the list because, again, I really think it just has too much against it to really be worth it. Like, this at the end of the day is going to die way too quickly to ever be relevant in Standard, and I just don't believe it. I don't believe in it. I don't. The last member of the trash tier is the Wanderbrine Distractor. 4 mana, blue merfolk, 3 and a blue. It's a 4/3. When it becomes tapped, a creature your opponent controls gets -3/-0 until end of turn. This is a form of evasion, but the fact that it comes out on turn 5 means that the fact that it activates on turn 5, it attacks on turn 5, means that it's just way too late. It does way too little. Not gonna do it for me. Those are the trash tier. So now we're gonna go to the actual list. We're going to go alphabetically. We're going to start with the Adept Water Shaper. It is a 3 mana white merfolk for 2 and a white. It is a 3/4 beefy. It says other creatures you control have indestructible. Now, I said we don't have any lords, and we don't. However, other merfolk getting indestructible is, you know, it's something. It's not nothing. Basically, what this means is that against certain decks, Adept Water Shaper is a 3 mana creature that turns a board wipe into targeted removal. Because if your opponent tries to wipe the board with a conventional board wipe and Adept Water Shaper's on the battlefield, only 1 creature dies, just this one. The rest of them have indestructible. They lose it after the destroy effect. However, there's a few things that this also has going against it. Well, I'll say one more thing that it has going for it first. At 3 mana, it actually comes down just in time to eat the kill spell. Like literally, sorry about that. It comes down just in time to eat the kill spell, to eat the board wipe. Your opponent is either going to play that on turn 3 with something like Split Up, or on turn 4 with Wrath of God, or any of the other options. It has something there. However, there's just so much single target removal that it could just end up being, you take turn 3 off. On turn 3, you play the Adept Water Shaper. Nothing else comes out. They answer it with their first kill spell or whatever. And in that case, it's not that good. If we're leaving Merfolk back to defend, it becomes a little bit more valuable, but we're just not doing that. We're attacking with our Merfolk. Our Merfolk are getting tapped. Our Merfolk are not going to be blocking. Again, on turn 3, just not enough. It just doesn't do enough. Are you gonna our 1/1 Merfolk and our 1/1 token are gonna you're gonna give them both indestructible? I just don't see it as being too impactful. However, it's not without its merits. It is beefy. It is very beefy. We cannot ignore the beefiness. It's between C and D. I think because of the beefiness, because this is Sentinel the Nameless City's stat line, and Sentinel the Nameless City is, we said, is kind of something. It is another creature that basically just gets killed immediately, but well, no, because you know what, Sentinel the Nameless City is actually growing our board while it's staying out. Adept Water Shaper is not doing that. This is going to be a D card. This is going to be D. That's what we say. Next up, we do have Champions of the Shoal. So Champions of the Shoal is a 4-mana blue Merfolk, 3 and a blue. As an additional cost to cast this card, you have to behold and exile a Merfolk that you control, or a Merfolk in your hand. So what that essentially means, behold is literally just like the English definition of the word. It's just literally like, behold, it's a Merfolk. So if you have a Merfolk in your hand, if you have a Merfolk on the battlefield, you just show it. You just point it out. You reveal it. Say, here it is. And you exile it. That's an additional cost to cast Champions of the Shoal. So when this creature enters or becomes tapped, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. No additional abilities. It is a 4-mana 4/6. Now, there's some 4-mana cards on this tier list. Heck, there's even a 6-mana card on this tier list. They are all in the D tier. So for Champions of the Shoal to be anything but that, it has to be head and shoulders above the other ones. Is Champions of the Shoal better than Deepfathom Echo? I'm asking myself that in real time. Is Champions of the Shoal better than Deepfathom Echo? I think it is. And the reason why I think it is because on turn 4, assuming that we have some board state, and there will be a non-zero amount of games in which on turn 4 we won't have a board state, because we will have just experienced a board wipe, in which case this isn't that great. There is less great, I'll say, for right now, is less great. I just don't like it, because here's the other thing. While it's possible that on turn 4 we might still have a Merfolk in our hand, it's probably more likely that all of our Merfolk will be on the battlefield at that point. We're going to be consistently playing our spells. We're going to be trying to play both 1 and 2 mana Merfolk. So probably by turn 4 we're going to be almost out of Merfolk, or out of Merfolk in hand. We'll have to take one off of the battlefield to cast this. It's a part of the cost. I just think it really sets us back more than it puts us forward in the majority of the cases. Now, let's say that we're not on turn 4, and let's say that we're on like turn 6 or turn 8, if such a thing could ever exist. In that case, where we have some amount of creatures on the battlefield or creatures in hand, and we can spend those to cast this, have 1/4/6 on the battlefield for up to 1 or 2 turns. Again, there's so much removal in this format. There's so many answers. There's no shot. This can't do anything good. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe this can do anything good. I think this is a D tier card. This is not good. Moving forward, we do now have the Deep Channel Duelist. Hey there. Okay, me again. This is seriously going to be the last time. Now, again, this is the card that I misread. I thought that it didn't have the other Merfolk you control have +1/+1 ability, and so listening to my opinion on it again, I realized that it doesn't really apply to the card that actually exists. So just know that in the case that a theoretical card that is the exact same as the Duelist is printed, but it just doesn't have the Lord effect, it'll be tier C. But since it does have a lore effect, it is tier A. Moving along. Next up, we have the Deepway Navigator. Deepway Navigator is an Azorius, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I'm getting there. Yes, Deepway Navigator is a 2-mana Azorius Merfolk. Again, another 2/2. When this creature enters, untap each other Merfolk you control. As long as you attacked with 3 or more Merfolk this turn, Merfolk you control gain +1/+0. Oh, so this is the other Lord, other than Mindspring. This is the other like actual like the next closest thing to a Lord that we have. Oh, this has Flash, by the way, just letting you know. So immediately before I even say anything else, the fact that this is a pseudo Lord, the fact that it is less than 12 mana, joking, the fact that it is a small amount of mana immediately makes me consider it for the A tier. I'm just going to leave this here for now while we talk. Just leaving it here for now. Okay. Flash. Another big point, okay? Because remember, Flash goes back to this. Flash is similar to this. Flash similar to this. All these things that have Flash, we give them a lot of credit because they allow us to leave up our mana. They allow us to play on our opponent's turn. They allow us to represent other threats to make our opponents less willing to play their powerful cards. I'm not gonna lie. Before I even evaluate its combat abilities, just the fact that it's a 2-mana 2/2 with Flash and it has other upsides, I mean, it's strongly an A tier card in my opinion. On a sight read, more or less. It's not a sight read. I have read this card before, but this synergizes so well with, I think, a lot of what the current pieces that we've seen so far really want to do. This gets in at the right moment, flash speed, instant speed. It powers up our other cards. It synergizes with our other flash speed Merfolk, and it powers them up. I said powers up twice. I know. It's good. This is what I'm trying to say. It also has, again, the same reasonable stat line that we mentioned with the Deep Channel Duelist. So, what else can you really say? Well, the actual pattern that I envision with this, how does this actually play out? So it's a 2-mana creature. So, but it's flash speed. So turn 2, you have a white and a blue, and you have this creature in hand with some other things. You probably already have a 1-mana Merfolk on the battlefield. Maybe your opponent also has a 1-mana card. So, you attack with your Merfolk. Something happens. Maybe it's blocked. Maybe it's not. Okay, the board state advances past the turn. Your opponent comes up, and your opponent either plays a creature or doesn't. They go to combat. If they have their creature, they're going to attack. So now it's combat on your opponent's turn. We'll say turn 3. Again, we're assuming your opponent's on the draw because, we want to assume the worst while we're, trying to give a hard evaluation here. Your opponent's turn 3. They're attacking with, 1 or 2 creatures. And you have, up to 1 tapped Merfolk. So you play this card on the declare blocker step before you declare your blockers, or rather on the attacker step before you go to declare blockers, and you untap your other Merfolk. So now your opponent is likely to lose at least one of the creatures that they attacked with, and on turn 2, one of the creatures that they attacked with is probably going to be a pretty important creature, especially if they thought that they could get a free hit. That would be like your Badger Mole Cub. I'm trying to think of, the other other important cards that come down on turn 2. Any of the aggressive red cards. I'm trying to think, your Otter tokens from the Izzet deck. Things like that. Elves, Llanowar Elves. This will lead to Llanowar Elves if your opponent thought that they could just get a free attack in with that. I think it's something to definitely consider. And then when you go into the late game, and again, this is standard. Late game is like turn 4, turn 5. Maybe you have 2 or 3 Merfolk out. They've already attacked. Now when your opponent thinks that they have something really easy, well, now you can untap all your Merfolk and you can gang block something big, or you can chump block something really big, and then you go to untap. Now you're attacking with 3 or more Merfolk this turn, and they all get more powerful. That could, theoretically on turn 5 or turn 6, like close out the game more or less. I like this card. There's certain things that make me want to push it down towards B. I really think it's going to stay at A again, just because it has such a high synergy. It has such like a good vibe with the rest of our Merfolk. But there is something to say about the fact that it is pretty weak again to removal. It doesn't get bigger itself. It asks you to have a lot of creatures on the battlefield, which in standard is not something that's always going to happen. But if we're playing aggressive Merfolk, if we're playing, small creatures, flash speed, getting kind of around some of that removal, I think this is going to be really important in that deck. A tier for my boy, the Deepway Navigator. Disruptor of Currents is next. That is going to be a 5-mana blue creature, 3 and 2 blue mana for a 3/3. When it enters, return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It has both Convoke and Flash. Now, this is the one that I think I misread last time. Never mind. I'm not going to actually include that in the final version of this video, so it doesn't matter. This is a 5-mana Flash 3/3. Now, the fact that it has Convoke does mean that it's potentially less. How much is it likely to be? Well, the most Merfolk that we're likely to have before our opponents really either, wipe the board, or failing that, lose the game themselves, or potentially have just more than us. Probably about 2 or 3 at the time where it's going to be really important. So then this could potentially be a 2-mana or a 3-mana flash speed, return 1 non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And you know what that means. That means that it's, if you squint, if you look really, really hard, it is essentially Harbinger of the Tides. Harbinger of the Tides is C. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a C. This has some kind of distinctions. Although it's probably going to be a C. First of all, the thinking positively, this does have the ability to be free. If we have enough Merfolk, especially if you have enough Merfolk tokens, we can just tap 5 Merfolk tokens, and this is a free removal spell for any non-land permanent, not just a creature, but any non-land permanent. Now, this does have flash, regardless of how much mana you spend on it. So if it's even if you spend less than 4 mana on it, unlike with Harbinger of the Tides, you will actually still get it for flash speed. Flash speed, again, Brineborn Cutthroat, Floodpits Drowner, Deepway Navigator, all these things. Good stuff. Downsides, it's never going to be naturally 2 mana. You're never going to play this for 2 mana on turn 2. You'll never be able to bounce whatever whatever 1 mana hasty threat that your opponent tried to send at you for 2 mana on turn 2 with this specific card. How much of a drawback is that? Honestly, it's not that much of a drawback. I mean, again, like, we're working at the baseline of Harbinger of the Tides. This might be stronger. I've kind of talked myself into thinking this is a little stronger than that. The fact that it allows you to target a non-land permanent is helpful. There are non-land permanents, especially big non-land permanents, expensive ones, that we can really set our opponents back on by removing them at the right moment. So there's an argument, I think, to put this one in the B tier. There is an argument there. It is dependent on how many Merfolk we can have out. It is dependent on how well we can really kind of control our battlefield. Like, this is going to ask us to be leaving our Merfolk up in a defensive way, which is sort of against what we want to do. But once we do that, then we can push forward and, do something really great. The fact that it has Convoke as well does mean that it is a super great synergy with Deep-Root Pilgrimage, a card that we will talk about later. Man, the fact that it works so well with the Deep-Root Pilgrimage really makes me want to put it in B tier. And I'm gonna end up doing that. Again, just because it does edge out Harbinger of the Tides in utility. It's similar, but it does what Harbinger of the Tides wants to do a little bit better than Harbinger can. I think this can very comfortably sit in B. Next, Eclipsed Merrow. My cat just scared the shit out of me. Eclipsed Merrow, a 3 mana Azorius card. There's a cycle of these, I believe, in Lorwyn. So it's 3 hybrid Azorius mana symbols for a 2/3. When this creature enters, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, you reveal a Merfolk, plains, or island from among them and put it into your hand. The rest go into the bottom in a random order. It's tempting to consider this card seriously just because we do consistently want to have more Merfolk in our hand after turn 3. Like once turn 3 passes, generally speaking, yes, we want to be able to have another Merfolk in our hand. But what are we giving up by playing this card? We're giving up anything better. This basically, Eclipsed Merrow is you saying, I'm going to spend 3 mana to try to find a better Merfolk than this thing that I just spent mana on. It's like, I'm going to spend 3 mana and hope that I get something better. For that reason, I don't think it can ever really sit in A tier or B tier. Again, it's like the best that this can do is this can bring you something that you want to see. How good is that? Not that good, honestly. I really don't think so, because yeah, at the end of the day, like, what do you want to be doing with your 3 mana? You really want to be getting ahead. You really want to be, making a threat. You really want to be disrupting what your opponent is doing. That's not what this is doing. You're not doing that with this. This ain't it. This just ain't it. Is it a C tier? Is it a D tier? I think it's a D tier. I think if you play this card, you are admitting to yourself that there are not enough good merfolk in the format. And while that may or may not be true, we are operating from the assumption that it is not true. So we're going to leave that in D. We're not going to talk about it. We're just going to lock it in the cellar and throw the key away. Encumbered Reejerey. 2 mana white merfolk, 1 and a white for a 5/4. Wow, that sounds pretty tough, you might say. What's the downside? I'll tell you. This creature enters with 3 1/1 counters on it. Whenever it becomes tapped while it has a 1/1 counter on it, remove a 1/1 counter from it. Wow, that sucks. But guess what? This 2 mana, 1 and a white would almost be kind of good if we were able to somehow cancel out that enters the battlefield ability. Hey, wait a second. Look what we have up here, Tishana's Tidebinder. Hey! This A rank card, this A tier card, that's probably going to be sitting in our deck most of the time. If we combine these two, now suddenly we have a 2 mana 5/4. Wow, that's actually pretty good. But you know what's not pretty good? Having to spend 5 mana for all that stuff. So we have the synergy between the Encumbered Reejerey and Tishana's Tidebinder. Tishana's Tidebinder is obviously up here in the A tier. And maybe you might say that, well, since the two of these together do something pretty nice, that must be good. This is a 5 mana combo, and the combo is 2 vanilla bulky merfolk for 5 mana. Huh. Is that all that bad? 5 mana for a 3/2 and a 5/4? I'm actually not going to lie. That kind of sounds like a pretty decent combo. Now, Tishana's Tidebinder is exactly 1 card. It's always going to be in the deck. And Encumbered Reejerey is significantly worse when we don't have access to this ability. However, hold the phone. Hold the phone. We do have this interesting card, which is called something different in Through the Omen Paths. It's called Detect Intrusion, which is 2 mana for an instant spell. It says counter an instant spell, a sorcery spell, or a triggered ability. It also has Web Slinging for 1 blue mana, which says you can return an untapped creature as an additional cost, and you can pay the alternate Web Slinging cost. So that is another, if we include Spider Sense, a blue counter spell, instant and sorcery only, but also triggered ability, counter spell. That is another way to just turn Encumbered Reejerey into basically a 3 mana 5/4. Now, no matter how you twist it, no matter how much you massage the truth, it is still vanilla. It does still really suck by itself. I'm not gonna lie. If you're gonna play this as a 2 mana, 2 mana 1/2, 2 mana 2/1, excuse me, I think this is really rough. And then you attack on turn 3 and it becomes a 3/2. I mean, it's really questionable. I mean, the nice thing is that it does grow turn by turn. This is essentially a sorcery speed Brineborn Cutthroat up to a certain point. It is capped off, unlike Brineborn Cutthroat. Brineborn Cutthroat can continue to grow past a 5/4, but Encumbered Reejerey can grow up to 5/4, and then with certain combinations of cards, this can actually just come out as a 5/4 for 2 mana. But Brineborn Cutthroat is huge specifically because it has Flash. That is a huge component of why that card is good. So I think Encumbered Reejerey is complicated. I think there is a surprising amount of argument that I can give this card for why it can actually be something to consider. However, it is heavily reliant on having something else to make it really good. So I think, like, if I was to evaluate this card in 2 different pieces, I would say the 2 mana 2/1 that grows slowly is probably a C tier card. You know, that's, I mean, it is aggressive enough over time that it's not something that you can really like entirely ignore. The 3 mana or 5 mana like combo version of this, where it's either, you know, the 3 mana 5/4 or the 5 mana 5/4 along with the Tishana's Tidebinder. You know, both of those are 2-card combos. I think that is actually a little bit more of an argument. That is probably more of a B tier kind of thing. It's a lot. It is aggressive stats, and it is spread out over multiple bodies. So, where does that ultimately go? I think it has to stay in the C tier, because at the end of the day, it will usually just be the 2 mana 2/1 that grows slowly over time. My cat is so silly. Next up, we have Meander's Guide. So Meander's Guide is a 3 mana white, 2 and a white, 3/2 creature. When this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped Merfolk you control. When you do, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card, no other stats. This card, quite interesting, simply because this is basically the only Merfolk Reanimator. Please confirm for me. I think this is the only Merfolk Reanimator. Like, we have, I mentioned in the trash tier up above, the Reanimator for instants and sorceries. This, I think, is the only Reanimator for creatures. And even more so, is very relevant. As you can see on this list, most of the relevant Merfolk that we want are going to be 3 mana or less. On top of that, the fact that it does allow us to, again, double trigger Deeproot Pilgrimage, which again is going to be a very synergistic card for most Merfolk-centric decks, at least until 2027, in my opinion. It is another heavy point in its favor. What are the points against it? 3 mana creature that does nothing when it enters and is threatening is basically just going to be a lightning rod for removal. And on turn 3, on turn 4, your opponent will have whatever removal they need. So they will be able to solve this problem if they have any, if they have any amount of preparation, any amount of response, any amount of interaction. This will be answered. And so I think the turn where you might want it, where you're going to return a 2 mana creature that you might have lost early, the previous turn or that turn, I think that's when it's not actually going to be that strong. Later in the game, when you're on like turn 5 or turn 6, and maybe, you have a couple of other, more threatening Merfolk. Maybe you've already played your Encumbered Reejerey and Tishana's Tidebinder the turn before, and then now you're playing your whatchamacallit, your Meander's Guide to, get back your I don't know, get back your Encumbered Reejerey because it got removed. I mean, it's not nothing. It's definitely not nothing. But again, it's very slow. 3 mana. Again, we want our 3 mana creature to really be something that allows us to kind of move away with the game. Does this do that? I think it doesn't. I think there's no way that our opponent can both be removing our creatures but also not be removing this particular creature. I think that doesn't really feel like a realistic situation for me. I do think this is a D tier card. I don't think it's above D tier. Well, I mean, but you have to be able to activate this at least some amount of the time, right? Like if this brings back a single Merfolk from the graveyard, that does feel pretty good. If this double triggers Deeproot Pilgrimage even once, that does feel sort of good. It's more than a D tier. It is a C tier. It does something in the Merfolk deck. It is not a 0 level, or again we're not talking about anything at 0 level, but it is more than just an irrelevant card. C tier is where we'll land that one. We also have the Pestered Wellguard, which is a 4 mana blue, 3 and a blue, 3/2. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying. So Pestered Wellguard. At 4 mana, we are asking a lot. We've mentioned it time and time again. We want our 4 mana creature to be doing more than nothing. We want our 4 mana creature to be helping us to finish our game. Is that going to be creating 2 bodies with a total power and toughness of 4/3? Ooh. Oh, wait a minute. Whenever this creature becomes tapped. Oh. Read the fucking wind. So, next we have Pestered Wellguard, which is a 4 mana blue creature that wins us the game. No, Pestered Wellguard, 4 mana, 3 and a blue, for a 3/2. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying. This is copy 5 and 6 of Deeproot Pilgrimage. So again, Deeproot Pilgrimage is a card that I'm going to talk about very shortly. It's going to come up after we talk about the actual Merfolk because it's a support card. But it is going to be central in, again, most decks that care about Merfolk because it generates evasive Merfolk, which is all we ever wanted. In that deck, Pestered Wellguard does basically the same thing, however, in a slightly less less powerful way. So first of all, it is more expensive. So 2 mana more than the enchantment. On top of that, it is less evasive because rather than being an enchantment, it is a creature. There's a lot of creature removal. We mentioned that. However, by itself, this is going to be less threatening than a lot of the Merfolk that we have. And what it is going to do before I think our opponent really gets around to it, again, assuming this is turn 4, we have maybe a couple of Merfolk out there that are doing pretty good on their own. This is not going to be, I think, threat number 1. But if we can combine this with our other tapping synergies, like I'm thinking about our Convoke creature up here that we just talked about, the what was it called, not the Deepway Navigator, the Disruptor of Currents, whether that be like a vehicle, whether that be anything, this is going to help us to create more evasive threats, where in this case, instead of being evasive to removal, they're evasive to blocking. So they're going to be able to get in and attack as we go forward and we do this. It is not at the same level as Deep-Root Pilgrimage insofar as it's not going to be as essential to the decks, I don't think. And I don't want to go so far as to even say that it's going to be on the same power level, because again, it has less power in a lot of vectors. But I think that this is a tough one. I mean, again, like, the argument starts at the B tier, and I think it can come down to the C tier. I mean, at the very end of the day, this is very dependent on other pieces to support it. I think we do have to put it in the C tier. I mean, it's, you squint and it looks pretty close to Deep-Root Pilgrimage, but really at the end of the day, it does have enough negatives. Like, I wouldn't say it's like going to be as essential to a deck as the Disruptor of Currents. I really just don't see that, but it's definitely something to consider. We next come up to the Silvergill Mentor, which is a which can be either a 2 mana, 1 and a blue, or a 4 mana if you're unable to behold a Merfolk. When this creature enters, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token. So at 2 mana, if you're able to behold the Merfolk that you played on turn 1, or behold another Merfolk in your hand, which you likely will be able to, this comes down as a 2/1 and a 1/1. Honestly, I think that's awesome. I really think that other than something that scales, other than something that grows, I think the other thing that we would want early in the game would be something like this, something that kind of spreads our threats over a couple of different bodies. The fact that once it gets removed, the token doesn't trigger the Deep-Root Pilgrimage, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, is a little bit of a setback, but this still is going to kind of synergize with the rest of the Merfolk that we have. This is still going to synergize with the Deepway Navigator, still going to synergize with the other Merfolk that we've kind of been mentioning, the lower tier ones, the ones that we're going to be using to sort of support us. Maybe some of these last two. We still haven't talked about the big Merfolk here, which is Sig, but we're going to mention that in just a moment. Having more Merfolk out, having more bodies, more warm bodies on the battlefield is what we want, is what we want to see in our aggressive strategy, and I do think that makes this a pretty close to essential card in the Merfolk deck moving forward. I mean, between definitely a B and an A, I see it as being as essential in the 2-drop slot as something like Floodpits Drowner. I mean, kind of, yeah, right? Like, if I see this on turn 2, and I'm not expecting my opponent to immediately on turn 3 play a Wrath and just erase the entire board. If I'm assuming that there's going to be significant control there, then I'm probably going to hold my mana back for the Floodpits Drowner, or I'm probably going to hold back for rebuilding with the Silvergill Mentor afterwards. But even then, when you rebuild with Silvergill Mentor, that's exactly what you do. You get it's a bit of an army in a can. I definitely want to call this another A tier card. This is going to be pretty big in the year of 2026, I'm going to say. Fight me. Silvergill Mentor. Next up, we have our penultimate, the Silvergill Peddler. That is a 3-mana blue creature, 2 and a blue, for a 2/3. When it becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Yeah, no, I can't. No, come on. After what we just talked about, after this 2 mana creature that's so versatile, that helps us out so much in our strategy, the fact that we're then going to follow that up with a 3 mana creature that sits, and then when it attacks, it's, you know, gonna just cycle, draw a card and discard a card. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, I think there's just like better things we can be doing on turn 3. Turn 3 we can be holding up our mana for Tishana's Tidebinder. Turn 3 we can be playing, like a Cenote Scout and holding up mana for Floodpits Drowner. Why are we going to be spending our mana at sorcery speed to hopefully draw and discard next turn? This is D tier. I'm actually a little bit curious. I might have meant to put this in the trash tier, and I'm really considering just deleting it right now. I kind of think I meant to put this in the trash tier. I mean, like what does this do? This literally just what, draw and discard? No, come on, get out of here. We have better things to do. This is out of here. Trash tier. Hasta la vista. Finally, so at the very end of our list, we do have the actual poster boy of, arguably the poster boy of the entire set, Sig. This is a dual face card. We have Sig Wanderwine Wisdom and Sig Wanderbrine Shield. So I'm going to start by well, I mean, I'm going to evaluate these cards together. As you can see, I only have one. It's either a binary yes or no if you're going to be including this in your deck. So it's not like, you can choose one or the other. And you have to cast the front side. The back side is something that you only get on your next turn's first main phase after you cast the spell. So this is something that you have to definitely be on board for both sides, or at the very least the front side if you're going to play this. So what does the front side say? Sig Wanderwine Wisdom, 1 and a blue for a 2/2. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Sig Wanderwine Wisdom, target creature gains. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card until end of turn. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay white if you do transform Sig. So, and this creature is unblockable. So, starting just with this side, what does this do? Turn 2 when you play it. This enters, and then a creature you control, when it deals combat damage, is going to draw a card. So, if on turn 2 you play this, you target your 1-mana Merfolk. You have a few. Okay, we've mentioned we have one really good one, and then one quote unquote A tier one, and then 2 B tier Merfolks that are at 1 mana. You target one of those. It deals combat damage to a player, assuming they don't have a creature on the first turn. If they do, this is a bit of an ask. This is not as good. You might play it after. Afterwards, just to have it on the battlefield at that point. You draw a card. Not bad. You go down to your next main phase. So I think in general, if possible, you probably want to pay the white, because both sides have actually the same stats and they're both unblockable. So you don't really lose anything by transforming it, and you gain the other side's effect when you do. So what is the other side's effect? Sig Wanderbrine Shield. Whenever this creature transforms into Sig Wanderbrine Shield, target creature you control gains protection from each color until your next turn. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay blue if you do transform Sig. So what does this mean? This is actually a little bit of an interesting type of protection. So a creature gains protection from each color until the end of your turn means a few things. The first thing is that it can't be targeted by removal. That's pretty good. That means whatever you target on your first main phase with this is not going to get removed by targeted removal at any other point. Now, it can be killed by targeted removal at the moment when this ability happens. You know, it can be targeted by removal at that moment, and then you're cooked basically. But that's a way you can get an opponent to kill something, and then whatever you play that turn is then kind of more safe because the removal spell is already used. That's one thing. It is also a form of evasion because when a creature has protection from all colors, any creature that has a color can't block it. If it's protected, it can't be blocked by something it has protection from, so it's also a form of evasion. There is also an associated downside because a creature that has protection can't be targeted even by something that you control. So in other words, you can't protect it with like a spell that gives hexproof, you can't enchant it, you can't do anything. You can't target it with your own abilities. So kind of a double-edged sword there, but still pretty interesting. And then, of course, Sig gets in because it's a 2/2 that's unblockable. Take this all together, what do we get? Well, first of all, a 2-mana 2/2 that is unblockable is, I think, something that's slightly unique just in Merfolk in general. I think there's a decent number of 1-mana 1/1 Merfolk that are unblockable. I'm not sure if there's a 2/1 unblockable Merfolk or other 2-mana unblockable Merfolk. Definitely none in recent memory. But this is a 2-mana 2/2 that's unblockable. So on turn 3, if this hasn't been removed already, this is going to deal damage. You will be able to tap this. This will trigger Deep-Root Pilgrimage. That's on baseline pretty good. The fact that it also is going to potentially draw you a card on the turn it comes in, and then on subsequent turns if it survives. And by the way, it can protect itself. It can also protect itself. That's a possibility. So it can also, be the creature that takes the bullet there. The fact that it can draw a card basically when it enters in every other turn after that. The fact that it can give your creatures some protection at a relatively low tax. We are, again, going to be a pretty cheap deck at the end of the day. So 1 mana isn't a insignificant cost. It isn't an insignificant cost, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. Is this an A tier? Why would I say no? Why am I hesitant to call this A tier? Well, the reason why is because while the ability on the front, Wanderbrine Wisdom, is interesting, the ability on the back is a little bit more questionable. Just because, again, like the targeted removal that it most wants to protect against. And again, I mean, you could also, again, play this as a form of evasion. That's a possibility, the protection ability. It's still very vulnerable. The fact that it happens at a very specific time, your first main phase, the turn after you cast the spell, it means it's very easy for your opponent to plan around, and in that way it's very easy to counter. So I think there's going to be a significant number of times where you play Sig and you get disappointed. However, I do also believe there's a non-insignificant number of times where you're going to play Sig and you're going to be pretty pleased. I think by definition that puts him at the B tier. I think that's just by definition. And so that's the list. So these are all the Merfolk that we have so far. Final thoughts. I do want to kind of really quick touch back on like some of these first cards that we talked about, just to see if they still like kind of match up with expectations. The first one I want to mention, everything that I have in the A tier, I definitely think that's a lock. Again, Mindspring Merfolk, the most consistent Lord, Deepway Navigator, pretty much close second. Floodpits Drowner, Tishana's Tidebinder, best removal and interaction spells that we really have attached to our Merfolk bodies, and the Silvergill Mentor as our best kind of like army in a can, like backup rebuild option. B tier, Brineborn Cutthroat. Yeah, I still think this is the B tier because again, like the flash plan, while not being completely like irrelevant in what we're doing, it's still not entirely the main point of most of the Merfolk. I think there's probably at the end of the day not enough really good flash Merfolk to bring together a good flash deck where Brineborn Cutthroat is the most useful. However, I think a non-zero number of him in most decks is still probably fine if you're also using instant speed, protection, and other spells and stuff like that. Cenote Scout, really tough because it's the only green Merfolk that I'm really excited about. You could put a non-zero number of him alongside of the Sentinel of the Nameless City, or possibly him alongside of whatever Bant spells that we may or may not talk about in just a moment. Or green spells. You could use them to splash into into Bant. However, again, the fact that this is a 1-mana creature, you want him to be out early, and he forces you into the 3rd color. We already have up here Deepway Navigator. The fact that it's A tier means that Merfolk is very likely going to be Azorius, in my opinion, in 2026. This is going to force us into Azorius right here. The fact that Cenote Scout will then push us into a 3rd color, that makes it pretty tough. I mean, this almost brings us back down to the C tier just because of the color alone, but I think I'm going to leave him up here because, I mean, it's something you can consider. If we can rely on our mana, I mean, there's a lot of good mana in this standard. That Cenote Scout could live off the back of things like Starting Town and Cavern of Souls and other things like that, but it's a maybe. Mistway Spy. I want to keep it here because this is really our 3rd 1-mana Merfolk, and the fact that it's blue puts it, despite the fact that it's less powerful, I think, than Cenote Scout, the fact that even though it has evasion, it's a little bit more questionable. The fact that it's blue makes it a more secure 1-mana play, and that, yeah, it's definite. The rest of these I mostly feel fine about. So really quick rounding out, we're going to do a quick look at some of the supporting Merfolk cards. And these are just very few. There's definitely more, but I just want to talk about a couple at the end of this. The rest can be discussed in other places. First, Deep-Root Pilgrimage. So a 2-mana enchantment. It says, whenever a non-token Merfolk you control becomes tapped, you create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. It's blue. I think no matter what you do, no matter what you're playing, you can't avoid the fact that until this rotates in 2027, this is going to be a huge part of any Merfolk deck. The fact that you can just continuously pump out Merfolk by tapping your creatures. You want to tap your creatures. There's 150 different ways in Standard to tap creatures right now. Deep-Root Pilgrimage is just going to be your army in a can. It's going to get you back from all of the sweepers and all of the removal spells that will generally be feeding on Merfolk decks and causing them to not be as competitive as they might want to be. Oh god, the rest of these I actually have to look up. Fuck, hold on. Sig's Command. It's a 3-mana Azorius Kindred Sorcery Merfolk. So even though this is a sorcery spell, this is also technically a Merfolk spell for all intents and purposes. So I don't think, if we go back to our tier list right here, I don't necessarily know if our Merfolk spells are really going to care about a sorcery being a Merfolk. We're not going to be attacking with our sorcery. We're not going to be able to put a 1/1 counter on our sorcery. We're not going to give it protection with Sig's ability or anything like that. We can't convoke with it. So that being said, I don't think it's going to really matter that it's Kindred, but the fact that it does have something to do with Merfolk means that we want to talk about it just to see. First of all, you can you choose to. You either create a token that's a copy of target Merfolk you control. Creatures target player controls gain lifelink until end of turn. Target player draws a card. Tap target creature, put a stun counter on it. So, first and foremost, 3 mana sorcery hurts a lot. The fact that we want to be doing things at flash speed, instant speed, and this is a sorcery really hurts. But what are the things that we get? So we can create a copy of a Merfolk that we control. Okay, there's not a lot of legendary Merfolk. There certainly are some. So having another Merfolk is not a bad thing. We can probably choose that most of the time as long as we have a Merfolk. Creatures target player controls gain lifelink until end of turn. That's going to be something that is going to be relevant, I think, rarely, because this doesn't give our creatures any form of evasion or any form of protection. So we do this, and then we run our creatures into a board full of defenders just so that we can gain some life and then lose the turn later. That doesn't sound great. Target player draws a card. We like drawing cards. If we can do this alongside of something else that's good, that's not that bad. And then tap target creature, put a stun counter on it. This I don't like because the things we most want to tap, I mean, our Merfolk do tap things, but that's because they're blue creatures, and blue creatures don't get to kill stuff. We don't actually care about tapping things that much that aren't our own things, and we definitely don't want to be putting stun counters on our own things, generally. So that does kind of suck. So that all being said, this is probably usually going to be 3 mana, create a copy of a Merfolk, and draw a card. I can't see this being that great. I mean, it's probably not that playable. I really don't see that happening at all. We next have Wanderbrine Farewell. This is another Merfolk Kindred sorcery, so it's 7 mana. It does have Convoke. Return 1 or 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Then if you control a Merfolk, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token for each permanent returned to its owner's hand this way. So 7 mana, again, sorcery speed. Convoke means that we're definitely going to be able to cast the spell once we have a decent board of creatures. Again, when are we going to cast this? Like, say that we have maybe 4 creatures, is going to be 3 mana. Is that correct? That's probably the most likely situation. And then again, once we pay 3 mana and tap our 4 creatures to do this, we are also going to be triggering the hell out of our Deep Root Pilgrimage. Returning 2 non-land permanents, creating 2 extra white and blue Merfolk on turn, again, what, 4 or 5? I mean, that could actually... Well, no, because again, we convoke this, we're tapping all of our things. This requires us to be on an even later turn. It's shaky. I think there are better things that you can be doing. 2 other cards that I want to mention that are not from the new set. We do have Summon Leviathan. Summon Leviathan is from Final Fantasy. It is... It is a 6 mana enchantment creature. It is a Saga Leviathan. So it's kind of complicated, but essentially over the course of 3 turns, it's going to do some stuff and then it's going to kill itself. On the turn when you cast it, it is going to return each creature that isn't a Kraken, Leviathan, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent to its owner's hand. So that's basically all of our Merfolk plus the token that Kiora makes, that card we talked about way back when, that's C tier. All those are going to stay out. All other creatures are going to be returned to their owner's hand. And then on the second and third turn, until the end of turn, whenever a Kraken, Leviathan, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpent attacks, we're going to draw a card. And aside from those abilities, it is also a 6/6 creature with Ward 2. So I have played with this card a decent amount since Final Fantasy, and while it does push your deck in a slightly more control-oriented kind of direction, Summon Leviathan is quite special in that this card functions really well with copy effects, of which we haven't talked about, but in blue there are a decent number. And so if you play this on turn 6 and you have even just 1 or 2 Merfolk, you, first of all, you get to attack with your Merfolk. Probably your opponent's not going to be playing any. If you're playing against Dimir, they might also be running the Floodpits Drowner, but otherwise not really. You're basically just going to be able to get in because your opponent loses all their cards. The next turn, they're going to play all their stuff again. And then once it comes back to you, your Leviathan ability is going to trigger. So now, whenever you attack with any of your Merfolk, or this creature, you're going to draw a card. On this turn, what you're going to do is you're going to copy Summon Leviathan. And then when you copy Summon Leviathan, all their creatures get bounced again. You're going to draw a bunch of cards. Pass to their turn again. Now you have a full hand and at least 3 mana open. They're going to try to play their things again or do whatever they're going to do. If they're smart, they're going to try to remove both of your Leviathans. But if they don't, then you're going to go to the next turn. Your 1 Leviathan is going to trigger the 3rd lore counter die. The copy is going to trigger the 2nd lore counter, still going to be around. Whatever Merfolk you've cast in the meantime, they're going to be out. And then now you have a double effect where each time you attack with any of your Merfolk, you're going to be drawing 2 cards. This, like usually after just 1 copy of Summon Leviathan, you're pretty far ahead and your army of Merfolk are basically just free to wreak havoc. That said, you have to get to 6 mana. You have to survive. You can't be dead. You can't be behind on board state. So you have to be controlling the board pretty well up until this point. That is not a small ask for a Merfolk deck. However, if your Merfolk deck plans to get to 6 mana, I think Summon Leviathan is something to consider because, again, Merfolk are really just cordoned off to specifically the Merfolk deck right now. None of the Merfolk that exist in Standard are really played anywhere outside of just specifically the Merfolk deck. Again, Deeproot, Floodpits Drowner is probably the one exception in Dimir. Floodpits Drowner is played in the Dimir decks. So this card is somewhat well situated, at least right now, in my opinion. It's something to consider, again, if you're planning to get to 6 mana. The last card I just wanted to mention is one that is popular also in Dimir, but it is helpful in our decks as well. That's Enduring Curiosity. Enduring Curiosity is a 4 mana 2 and 2 blue for a 4/3 cat enchantment creature. It has flash, okay? Flash speed. We like things with flash speed, remember. It says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. We like dealing combat damage to players with a lot of different creatures. We like drawing cards. When Enduring Curiosity dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment, so it's not a creature anymore. So this is a card that, if you play Standard right now, you should be more or less familiar with it. It's not like it's the most popular. Again, probably Dimir is the deck that most uses Enduring Curiosity to the best effect, at least. And Dimir has always kind of been, at least in my experience, kind of like a 2nd or 3rd most popular tier kind of deck. Not too many people on the ladder play it that I've seen. But those who do, if you've ever played against someone with Enduring Curiosity, you know just how annoying it is to be just slightly behind and then get hit with, one or two small creatures and then have your control opponent, refill their hand. It sucks. So if you're playing Flash Speed, if you're playing in blue, Enduring Curiosity is going to be something to consider. It is 4 mana, which means that, we're going to be passing to our opponents possibly turn 5, having not done anything, just holding up basically this creature and maybe a counterspell. So it's not an insignificant ask, but this is definitely something to consider. It's something that comes down after our opponent has decided that they're not going to block our minuscule threats, and then suddenly we're quite a little ways ahead. Okay, and here for the last time with the final updated version of the tier list. A higher quality version of this should also be available somewhere, either linked here or linked somewhere. And yeah, this is what we have. Notice that I have also included and swapped around a couple. So Wanderbrine Trapper is now here. It has taken the place of Mistway Spy, and I have, at the end of the day, decided that with Mistway Spy, 1 mana, evasion, flying, getting up to a 2/2. If we're doing any copy effects, getting up to even higher than that, we're doing really good. I didn't mention just a moment ago, but a special extra shout out to all the copy effects in blue. Those are also good with our Merfolk Lords, especially. And a very final shout out to one more card, which is going to be River's Rebuke, which if you end up playing Summon Leviathan in your deck, River's Rebuke is going to be the sideboard tech against the mirror. So, whereas Summon Leviathan is not going to affect any of your opponent's Merfolk, if you happen to be playing against Merfolk, then River's Rebuke is going to do that same thing, but it's gonna help you out. Not gonna give you the same card draw effect, but hopefully you can still get ahead now that your opponent's tokens and their enchantments are all gone. Yes. Please do let me know what your thoughts are. I'm interested. I'm going to be building these decks slowly. I don't really have a wealth of wild cards, but I do have a lot of the Merfolk that are already printed in standard, and I do intend to prioritize getting the newer ones as well, especially these two up here. I didn't even check to see what the rarity are of these cards. I'll look into that a little bit later. Hopefully, I don't think these are rare. At least Silvergill Mentor. Silvergill Mentor seems like an uncommon card. I could be wrong about that. Hold on. Yeah, Silvergill Mentor uncommon, so we like that. And then Deepway Navigator. Deepway Navigator is going to be a rare, so that's going to be the one that you're going to have to shell out the wild cards for. But Silvergill Mentor, not too bad. And then the last one, just that I know Sig is going to be rare. And then what is it? The what's his name here? The Disruptor of Currents is probably rare as well. Yeah, that's going to be a rare as well. So you're not going to have to. You're not going to spend I'm not going to be spending a low amount of wild cards on this deck, but we'll be getting there. I might be posting videos about that. We'll see how I'm feeling on all that, but I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Bye.